All right, great breakdown with Jason. Fantastic breakdown. And we're going to go from one good guest to another damn good guest. We're joined with Arnaud Develay. How you doing, Arnaud? You doing okay today?
Hello, Jamal. I'm doing fine. Thank you.
Good. Arnaud, he's an author, political analyst, international lawyer specializing in international criminal law. His book, Foreign Entanglements, Biden, Ukraine, and the Fracturing of America's Political Consensus. Definitely check it out. Um, Arnaud, I saw there are a few things that I want to hit with you, but the first one has to do with the energy wars that seem to have been taking place, where if you were on social media, there were a lot of people who were screaming, "Oh my God, Ukraine is winning. They're taking out Russia's energy grid." And this comes out in Bloomberg today to get across how far from the truth that was, especially when Russia seemed to up their game in regards to hitting their own infrastructure. I mean, hitting Ukraine's infrastructure. 60% of Ukraine's capability of producing gas is destroyed, just gone, completely obliterated. And I guess, I used to make this argument that part of what Russia is doing, the reason that this is quote unquote taking so long in the way that people will talk about, isn't weakness. It's because Russia recognizes that there could be a future war with Europe and that these things are done on some level to damage Europe before they even get to that point. Because who is going to supply the gas and energy to Ukraine if not for Europe? Give me your take on this. Give me your thoughts.
Well, some economist, liberal economist, a neoliberal economist, French one, his name is Charles Gave,
Mhm.
used to define energy as the capability to power an economy. So I guess by extension, without energy, it makes it even more difficult to wage war.
Yeah.
Hence your allusion to Europe being preemptively deprived of the means to wage any kind of adventurism, military adventurism against Russia. So Russia is trying to, of course, first and foremost, dismantle Ukraine's capabilities to continue waging war, essentially dismantling their infrastructure, the ability to deploy troops, blowing up bridges, blowing up, any kind of nodes.
Mhm.
But also, and you're right to underline it, yes, making sure that, well, they have no light, they have no power, they have nothing to power those armament systems. So it's a long, it seems kind of painstakingly slow, but it's methodical. It does the job. It's not a flash in the pan like you would have it per Hollywood standards, but Russia has never followed the script as far as Hollywood standards is concerned. It seems somewhat dull, but over time it's very efficient. So to make a long story short, it makes perfect sense in what they're trying to accomplish. Keeping in mind again that the idea is to try to limit the loss of life. So again, this is the prime directive because you have to live with those people. They live next door. Whoever is going to be left within this, it's out of the country now, and so you want to make sure that you focus your attention on the means, the delivery, means of delivery, the means themselves in terms of power infrastructure, power grids, and why not? Why not? If you're lucky, maybe try to get substantial amount of the population to feel like that's it. They're fed up to live in such conditions. You might
Yeah.
be able to recruit people, and have them turn against their leaders. And I say leaders, quote unquote, of course. They're
The,
they're
the
anything
communist
but
regime, right?
elites. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I guess my thought is, but that seems to also be applying for Europe. Like if you look at the German economy, for
Mhm.
example, the German economy is tanking. I mean, they're losing hundreds of thousands of jobs. They're in a recession for like the third term. I believe they're going into the third year where they're back into another recession. If you look at France, France is utterly and entirely collapsed. Just fundamentally collapsed. The guy lasted 14 hours
Mhm.
as prime minister. And now there's a question of, okay, well, is Macron going to stay? He's saying that he is. If you bring up another government and that government collapses, at that point you're going to have a another election cycle, And of course, the National Rally is most likely going to win that election cycle this time around. I mean, you can look all through Europe, and they're going into this kind of debt crisis while simultaneously trying to supply Ukraine with energy, money, weapons, etc. It seems like this is not just hitting Ukraine; it's also hitting Europe.
Yeah, it's all connected. You're right. It's almost like a matryoshka, Russian dolls. One fits into the other, and so yes. So the analysis one can make about Ukraine, to the extent it is the proxy per se, extends to Europe as well, because Europe is a proxy of Washington. And so to the
Yeah,
extent Europe is coerced into buying American wares, this gives time and political cover to the establishment in DC, trying to somewhat extract victory out of the jaws of defeat, one could say, in a way, at least in as far as perception management is concerned.
yeah,
But obviously, as one of my law professors used to say when we were going through the res ipsa loquitur tort classes, shit happens, and sometimes you got to take one for the team. And so, I guess Europe is going to have to take one for the team. Problem is, they've banked so much politically on this Ukraine project, to the exclusion of economic, viability. I'm not even saying prosperity, but viability. You
yeah.
mentioned it. France is on the verge of being basically placed under the care of the Frankfurt bankers, if not the IMF per se.
IMF. Yep.
And so right now, the idea is, they're trying to, why are they running out of prime ministers? Because every time a cabinet is formed, the main item on the agenda is to have a budget, which is dictated by Brussels and Frankfurt, to be adopted. And this requires fleecing the French taxpayer at the tune of $40 billion per year. But at the same time, you've given $54 billion to Zelensky, and you haven't even consulted with Parliament or anything like this. So the French people are like, "Whoa, what's going on here? This just doesn't compute. It doesn't." I mean, even the less sophisticated of them, they're less concerned about following up with what's going on. They can feel that something is drastically, amiss here.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're right. But they have no choice. They have to maintain that trope. They have to maintain this discourse. I'm talking about politicians, Macron, chiefly among them. But we have to understand at the same time that Macron is surfing on chaos, because his job is not to be defending French interests. His job is to, if anything, accelerate French national demise, so that the construct per se is absorbed into a supra-federal European state, of which he fancies himself to be the first de facto, or at some point down the road, European emperor, which is why Putin actually makes fun of him, compares him to Napoleon, but quickly prompting to say, yeah, at least Napoleon won a few battles. He was known as a master tactician, even if he miscalculated on the ability to rally the Tsar to the continental blocus embargo blockade against the UK. But Macron is anything but that. Macron lives in his own fantasy world. You mentioned Germany. Germany, yeah, I think the numbers are awful. We're talking about over the last 3 years, it's about 25% of its industrial base that's gone, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And and you have BlackRock Mertz, who's like, not unlike Macron, who's a Rothschild baby, is being endorsed by the oligarchy there, and to do a certain job. And that job is to basically, pursue the Ukraine project. Which brings us to what we were slated to discuss today, which is what's going on with this peace momentum, alleged peace momentum between Washington and
Yes.
Moscow.
Well, that's what I was going to get at. I mean, just one last point on this. The reason why I went this route is because Gilbert Doctorow, who actually usually made a point of saying, Gilbert Doctorow made this point of saying that he thought that Putin was weak in his response to the whole Tomahawk missile stuff. And going to this, I guess, moving into the conversation where his response was effectively, look, the relationship between us would basically be over with if you're supplying them with tomahawks. I think tomahawks are a bluff, but whatever. I guess my point is the two main political entities in Europe, France, Germany, both are going through political chaos. France could legitimately lose in regard to its war party. And if you get the national rally, they're going to be far more skeptical of the war. Just like the Czech election, Babis, skeptical of the war, effectively saying he's not going to arm Ukraine going further. And if the AfD ends up taking power in Germany because of the policies for Germany, what does that mean for the capacity of Europe to maintain this war footing that they seem to be on? I guess I'm saying that the logic that seems to be going through Russia seems to be right in regards to what's affecting and what's taking place in Europe, that it may damage Europe's capability politically of continuing on this war footing. That was the point that I was trying to make. That was the reason why I went that route with it. But
Sure.
but yeah, you're right. Is there a relationship now, or is there any relationship between Russia and the United States in regards to peace talks? Because they seem to be over with at this point.
Well, to say the least, the momentum generated by the Alaska summit has all but evaporated, and there were somewhat a few statements made at the senior level, one from Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ryabkov, who somewhat alluded to, the window closing, somewhat paraphrasing what he said, but at some point he's saying, you've got to, if you want to talk the talk, you got to walk the walk. I mean, we're willing to be patient, but you've been in charge for 10 months now. We've had a slew of meetings. You've sent your special envoys. We've met on the sidelines of a lot of fora. But so far, we haven't even moved forward on some of the most minute issues bearing on reestablishing diplomatic interoperability. Even direct flights, which at some point have been mentioned, never materialized.
Right.
So I don't know. It's and then at the same time, as you mentioned, we have those kind of inflammatory statements bearing on the shipping of Tomahawks missiles. So it's so. With all due respect, with Dr. Doktorov, fact is, yeah, I mean the term weak. It's not very academic, I wouldn't say that, Vladimir Putin is weak. Putin is, if anything, a very nuanced person who takes into account a lot of factors and does not just kind of like, fly the handle. That's not his own, that's never been his style. Right. So he's somewhat, he does what Macron should be doing. He levitates above the factions and he arbitrates. But one thing seems to be, there's a trend, I would say, on the Russian side, which somewhat would tend to say that there's growing impatience with, the way the Americans seemingly are stringing the Russians out on a lot of things. And so it's important in that sense to underline what happened on Vladimir Putin's birthday, as he was in Leningrad. He was very low key. I mean, my business is Russia, and I ain't got no days off. That's basically the idea. But he had dinner with not with guests, but with his general staff. So he was appraised of the situation. Things were reinforced on the fact that throughout the front, across the front, the Russian armed forces are steadily grinding their way westward. That procurement is on schedule, if not ahead of time. But the idea was, there was a consensus up until I would say recently, which bore on, we're going to somehow vehiculate the idea that we are content with the 4 new regions and we have no intent to move forward, except maybe to get a
buffer.
Buffer zone. Yes. Now it would seem that the pressure is increasing on the top executive to actually allow the Russian armed forces to grab more territories. So this is this is the trend where we're, that we are seeing developing now at the highest level in Russia. It's not said openly, explicitly, but there are little tidbits being vehiculated at key nodes of the executive branch, whether it's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Ryabkov is not a nobody. He's someone who's touted as the potential successor to Lavrov,
right.
When Lavrov decides to call it quits. And obviously, you have a lot of people within the entourage of the president who are, also feeling that enough is enough. I mean, some would say, yeah, Medvedev, but Medvedev is more like a kind of, well, not just Medvedev. There are other people as well who, espouse this kind of like, we don't have to appease Trump because Trump, in some of those elements, as far as their perception of Trump is concerned, as Trump is actually not the bill of good that we were sold. The guy is weak.
He
He's
is. Yeah.
first, he's not informed. He does not work his files. He's somewhat of a dilettante, and he's someone who can be easily swayed. And so, how much patience should we express toward this psychological profile? Is he a viable partner? You know, because up to now, yeah, the idea has been okay. He's a blowhard. One day he says something, the next he says the opposite. Ultimately, he talks about tomahawks, but then somebody, we can assume somebody in his entourage tells him it's not as simple, Mr. President. There's a few logistical aspect involved with the use of tomahawks, which would basically get us directly involved. And the Russians are perfectly aware of that, and they indirectly remind us that this would technically means, we are not just from a degree of separation, we are directly, allowing strikes deep into Russian territories. So I think we are approaching somewhat of a crest now, and some hard decisions are going to have to be taken because, on the ground, I mean, as far as the situation, factually speaking, is concerned, and you got to go with facts at some point. You can't just. I mean, you can. Hope springs eternal. I can conceive that, but there are other parameters to take into consideration. And if it takes two to tango. If you feel like you have no partner to do so,
Yeah.
well, you got to do what you got to do.
So there
So
is
we'll
pressure
see.
on Putin to push further and harder
Yeah.
and
Yes.
to
Yes.
abandon this idea of um, maybe not necessarily abandon diplomacy. Obviously, Putin is a politician.
Of
I think
course not.
all things being equal, he would be open to it. But to kind of accept, I'm not going to get a partner in this. Like a U.S.
No.
president can't make the agreements that will be necessary for us to end the war. So we need to continue on in regards to what we're doing.
Well, if anything, in this far as like peripheral subjects and topics that were discussed during those summits and those meetings in Riyadh and Alaska, we can assume we haven't seen any progress whatsoever, at all. And it seems like wherever we get a little bit of momentum, some say, well, the Europeans, the neocons within the administration, we're hearing Witkoff is on his way out by the end of the year. It's a very taxing job, special envoy, he's had his share, I guess, dealing with,
Everything.
1 year of Washington. Yeah. So he just wants to go back to what he was doing because he's like, that's it. So in the end, we're back where we started. A weak president and undecisive, hesitant, quickly pressured. Obviously, he's sitting on a volcano on a domestic level, so and they can activate that at any moment. They have a lot of levers on him. He's not this kind of alpha male that we were presented. Far from it. And so he'll go wherever the wind tells him to go. That's the problem. You cannot conduct policy by not having a clear idea of where you're going. And the Russians, they always said so. If anything, they preferred someone like Biden because at least things were clear with Biden.
Mhm.
With Trump, you know, it's
See,
it's it's
see,
wishy
my concern
washy.
with
Yeah, yeah.
Biden or Harris is
Yeah.
that they were going to end up in a third world war.
It's the
That,
worst of both worlds.
yeah,
Well, I mean, Biden was actually a vegetable, so you were actually dealing with the Blinken administration, which is who
uh,
brings in a lot of family grievances and vendetta going back a century or so. So that's even that adds a layer to it.
yeah.
But those people are still there to be sure. And Trump or no Trump, presidents come and go, and those people remain. They're federal employees, and they just are so ensconced into the federal bureaucracy. and they've got relays and everywhere in the media, in the think tank business sector, so and Wall Street as well. So
Mhm.
it's complicated.
Yeah, he's surrounded by
And the
big
guy's
time.
gonna be gone after now 3 years. It's almost a year. I mean, he was elected in he didn't take office until January, but it's already almost been a year. So that's it. So now next year is
Maybe,
all going to be about the midterms. You gotta
maybe.
position yourself for. Yeah, maybe.
I mean,
Yeah,
the reason why I
maybe.
say maybe is because Donald Trump seems to be fashioning himself to be a king, and putting the military on domestic soil is
All right,
no longer.
don't get me started on this. Yeah, this is of course. I mean, you could go on forever, for hours, for sure, about the way this administration, this term is shaping up to be. It's very disappointing, even to the MAGA yes person. It's like, what the hell?
Yeah,
This is not
it's
what
like
we
I
were
didn't vote for
promised. I
this.
mean, the
Yeah.
base is split, man. Your base, you managed to split your base.
And he
Bravo.
doesn't care. And he doesn't care, by the way, because as you point out, he's out in 3 years. That's assuming he doesn't
He's
become
out.
king, or he doesn't die in office or something like that. No, I don't think he cares all that much. I mean, yeah, he's going to have to deal with the midterms, but I will see. I mean, if you were putting military on home soil, something that is supposed to be illegal, by the way, but if you're doing that on in the
1878
very,
Posse Comitatus Act. Yes,
yep,
it's a big bar. Yeah.
he seems to
I
be
mean,
blowing
a
off.
few presidents were tempted to do it, but they never, crossed that final Rubicon because
That particularly,
it's such a stigma. Yeah.
yeah,
But
especially in
hey,
America.
those are imperial policy. They always come home to roost. Imperial policies always come back to the core.
Yeah,
This has been a lesson throughout history, and obviously, an unheeded lesson, as it were.
we're
But
going
this
to
is what
learn
we're
the hard
seeing
way.
now.
Yeah.
And with the special layers that a lot of the military and law enforcement personnel also get training and externship in our strong allies in the Middle East.
Hmm.
So they come back and then they can
Israel,
yeah,
yes,
they,
yes,
they
unfortunately.
they can play the part, as far as suppressing dissent is concerned. So
Let me ask you this:
not good.
is Odessa included into Russia's plans? There was a map where, let's call it Greater Russia, that was conspicuously on a board that people saw, and Odessa was part of it. Now, I always thought that Odessa had to be part of this deal. Like,
Are you
it,
talking about the map in the Oval Office?
well, that
There was a map in the Oval Office when Zelensky was there, but I guess you're talking about a different location,
I
right?
thought, yeah, I was talking about a different map, but Odessa was included as Russian territory, and to me, it's like, well, that's
Well,
the last.
Odessa has always been Russian historical land. Odessa
Yes,
was founded under Catherine II. So, yeah, it's Russian land. Yes.
agreed.
I'm anticipating
But
your question, but yes.
right. So
Yeah.
yes, it was always considered to be Russian land. An atrocity took place there by the Ukrainians, the one that got popped
Hmm.
by the dad. Um, I mean, I was having a conversation at the radio station about 2 years ago before we got fired. And I pointed out, I was like, Odessa has to be part of the military campaign. How do you not bring the Russian land back into it, considering what took place? And they were like, yeah, but how would they make that work? How would that happen, etc.? Is Odessa part of this? I mean, if you're going to end this war, and let's say you don't take all of Ukraine, do you at least protect the Black Sea by getting rid of Ukraine's ability to operate on the Black Sea by taking Odessa?
Well, I would answer your question by shifting it around and referring to what happened, a mere 2 weeks ago in Moldova. If
Yeah,
Moldova was such, an important pawn on the chessboard, to the
yes,
extent they outright stole the election for Maya Sandu. It's that there are plans basically to make a move, probably on Transnistria, try to create a provocation there, and from that point on, things could escalate really quickly. Because I guess the French are going to try to make a dash for Odessa. Actually, it's interesting, historically speaking, as an aside, while Catherine II founded Odessa, the city itself was built by French architects and engineers.
interesting.
So there we go. We're seeing those two elements again, just somehow being yeah, coming to a showdown in Odessa, which is, and as you said, access to the Black Sea. I guess the sole colonial project. If you lose access to the Black Sea altogether, that's pretty much it.
Hmm.
So I'm pretty darn sure something is being prepared about Odessa, Transnistria, and if Transnistria, which is a somewhat of a unresolved geopolitical offshoot of the Cold War, there's a huge cache of weapon there, huge depot,
Yeah.
which is guarded by there are Russian troops there. So obviously, if they want to accaparate Transnistria and everything that's in it, probably to arm Zelensky, provide him the weapons that he needs. If anything, I mean, at this point where we are now, they are starting, stealing Russian money, the frozen funds. So th- I don't believe those people have any limits. They will prod and poke and try to see how they can open that second front. Georgia last week was yet another instance on the heels of Moldova. They are desperate. And don't forget the South Caucasus, obviously, which is, the kettle, it's on the stove right now. So it's all in place. They're not giving up. They're not giving up. And I think, yes, Odessa might not be something that is pursued on the Russian initiative, but they might be obligated to react to something emanating from Moldova and by extension Transnistria, which is right next door to Ukraine at the level of Odessa. So they will want to, yes, extend probably, operations in that sector, take the city, and send troops into Transnistria to protect their assets there. At least
Well,
my understanding is that they're going to be lured into this, so
oh,
the
basically
NATO
they're going to be
side can
forced
get.
to respond.
Yeah, because NATO always functions like this, from provocations to provocations using false flags. Of course, the media, to whip people into a frenzy. And ultimately, when that fails, they create, a factual predicate on the ground, which the other side cannot just, allow to unravel without reacting.
Yes.
So right now, we could say yes. I mean, yep, the Dnipropetrovsk region, Kharkov region, Nikolaev region, yes, those are also historic Russian lands. Odessa might have been actually a card left available for negotiation, i.e., I could sweeten the deal for you guys so that you keep an access to the sea. Just surrender to us all the perpetrators of the massacre of 2014. Let's clean up all the extremists, who are more or less running Odessa at the local level. But once this is done, we can come to some kind of understanding.
Hmm.
That card might be sacrificed on the altar of escalation at some point. Again,
But
because they have no choice as far as the Europeans are concerned.
yeah, but it doesn't seem like there's any negotiations taking place at all. Like that, this is
No,
going
of
to
course not.
like
No, no,
we're trying to
no.
make
But I was
sanctions.
thinking, about 18 months ago, this actually was an element of language.
Potential.
Oh, yeah, Odessa. Yeah, there's no rush. At some point, it could be a negotiating card, negotiating tool. But from what we've seen, with the Romanian, Georgescu being taken out, I
Hmm.
mean, no, they're just, there's no room for dissent. They're not even trying, to pretend that they are defending democracy. It's difficult to imagine any kind of creative way to resolve this confrontation, in a civilized fashion. I think Europe has gone completely overboard. You were saying the national rally might come to power in France. I doubt it. I don't
You
think
don't think so? Oh,
No,
there's so many.
Brussels won't allow it, and the AfD they won't be allowed to triumph in Germany, no matter what, because the oligarchical supra-federal establishments and those transnational group slash interest, they are so far into what they're trying to accomplish that they cannot remotely take a chance on a party that once upon a time they might have cleaned up their act, semantically speaking, since then.
Mhm.
But once upon a time advocated for national sovereignty. That's not a risk they're willing to take. So AFD, they will use the Basic Law of 1948, and they will outlaw the party on some flimsy pretext that it's an extremist party which threatens German democracy.